Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the hearing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. I'm Vice Chair Robert Pearman, an attorney member. Our chairwoman has had a family medical situation. We all wish them a full and speedy recovery and give our moral support to Cynthia Peralta at this time. A virgin chair, so be gentle to me today, please. Steve Samaniego is sitting in as an alternate for Cynthia today. And a point of personal privilege, I want to congratulate Member Makai Ali for being reelected to the Compton School Board for another term. Thank you. So we have one matter on calendar and one action item. Now, before I begin, anyone have any public comment on any matter within our jurisdiction but not on the agenda? I see no one in the room. No one on Zoom appears to do. Okay. Then we'll call the first matter, Goodrich Corporation, item 6253-1. Would you have appearances, please, first for the petitioner?
Robert Hines from Farrell, LeBron and Martell on behalf of Goodrich Corporation, the petitioner.
And for AQMD?
Mary Reichert on behalf of the executive officer.
Mr. Hines, do you have any witnesses that you might call today?
I do.
They're in the room?
They are.
Okay, I ask them to please stand, as we'll have to have them take the oath. And Ms. Reichert, are any witnesses that you might call today?
I do not intend to affirmatively call any witnesses, but I do have district witnesses available, so we can ask them to stand in case the board has any questions.
Any district witness also stand? And please answer, I do or I. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you may give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, what exhibits do we have on this matter?
One exhibit for the petitioner is a PowerPoint. That would be exhibit number 1. It's an 11-page document. I think everybody got it. And then we have for the district proposed interim variance conditions. It's a single page. And that would be respondent's exhibit A.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again, any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item, Goodrich Corporation 6253-1. Anyone on Zoom who from the public wants to comment on that issue that you see, Madam Clerk?
No, I don't see any.
All right, good. All right, we'll have an opening statement. First, Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pearman. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to the members of the hearing board, and thank you for allowing us to present this morning with respect to the Goodrich petition for an interim variance. I do want to share my screen so that I can present some background information focused on the good cause findings, because my understanding is that we'll proceed in a bifurcated fashion. And with respect to the interim variance, we'll look to you folks to make findings with respect to good cause. So as mentioned, you have this as an exhibit. Let me play with the size just for a moment.
Yes, I do appreciate you pointing out it is bifurcated, just looking at an issue for the interim, good cause for the lack of a regular notice. And again, it's just an opening statement, so you make it rather brief.
Yes, and I will do that. As I said, I just want to do this really for context. So I'm here on behalf of Goodrich Corporation, which is part of the Collins Aerospace family. And I'll run through these quickly if I can. Got too many screens up here, I apologize. How do I advance this? Oh, there we go. Okay, all right, simple as that. So this facility is in Santa Fe Springs, near Norwalk, and the location, as you can see, is relatively nearby, about an hour or so away. The facility is about 76 years old, built in 1945, so it's been in existence for quite a while. Has a fairly large footprint in the context of manufacturing landing systems for aircraft, for the aerospace industry. And the particular product type that the facility produces and fabricates is brakes and seals. So there are 3 of these carbon facilities within the landing systems umbrella associated with Goodrich. One is in Pueblo, Colorado, one is in Spokane, Washington, and one is in Santa Fe Springs. I mentioned that because of the issues associated with part of the demonstration of good cause and then the subsequent health and safety code findings, because this is a critical component to the overall manufacture and distribution and the supply chain associated with landing systems that Goodrich engages in. So this is just a quick slide to show a little bit about the output from the particular facility. There's some aspects that deal with commercial brakes, others that deal with military and related business. So what we're talking about today is an emergency flare. And it's important to recognize that obviously, as Ms. Perez will testify to, there's a number of permits issued by South Coast Air Quality Management District related to facility operations. And we're here today seeking an interim variance with respect to one of those permits concerning the emergency flare. The emergency flare is a pollution control device that operates in concert with these furnaces that you see on the screen right now. And these are very large furnaces that basically operate for as many as a couple of weeks in the context of the fabrication of these landing system gears. So in the context of the interim variance request, what we seek today is variance to operate this secondary air pollution control device beyond its permitted 12-month rolling limit, and that's the emergency flare. So the emergency flare, as I mentioned, is a component of the pollution control system, but it only operates in a quote-unquote emergency fashion. And as our witnesses will testify to, we had a malfunction with respect to a particular piece of equipment within the air pollution control system that caused the flare to operate for a period of time in excess of the 12-month rolling limit, which is why we need to get the variance relief. And we'll talk in more detail through the witness testimony concerning the valve failure that caused the February event. It was, as the testimony will be presented, unanticipated. And typically, and this is why the rolling average for the emergency flare is only a few hours during the course of the year, the flare rarely operates for longer than 10 or 20 minutes. So this was a very isolated, unusual incident that occurred. Significantly, we've worked with district council and district staff to agree on proposed interim variance conditions. I think you have those before you. And in the context of those interim variance conditions, I would point out that district staff inspected the facility, visited the facility, I believe it was last week. The days are all kind of blending together here, but it was last week. And then there were subsequent phone conversations as well. So the district and Goodrich have been working very closely together with respect to this interim variance request. And I think there's a good deal of knowledge associated with Goodrich's operations that the district has learned, and information as well that the district has conveyed to the Goodrich folks in the context of continued operations. Here's a picture of the flare. And I think it's important, you folks deal with so many different kinds of facilities. This is not a landfill gas flare. It's not a refinery flare. It sits probably 60 feet above ground surface. And it's not a very big piece of equipment. You can see it there, the view from the flare from the ground level up that tower. And again, it's part of the pollution control system associated with the manufacturing. I won't go through this in detail, this particular slide where we talk about the EHS incident notification and the manner in which the emergency flare ran beyond the permitted limit, because Ms. Perez will testify to this. And I recognize that we want to be quick in our presentation, and I'll take my cues from you. But we want to present sufficient evidence so that we meet the good cause findings. So it's a complicated facility, and that's why at this point, unless you instruct us otherwise, we intend to call our EHS manager. We also intend to call our furnace manager, Jeff Irby, and then our maintenance manager, Tim Fong. And then last but very much not least, the site lead, Mark Ruiz, can offer testimony concerning the potential loss of revenue and the implications associated with the potential that if the interim variance is not granted, that the facility would not be able to operate. But I think these will be useful to you to look at, and especially in the context of Ms. Perez's testimony, this next one, the February flare event timeline. And this is part of how we will demonstrate good cause. There were a number of events that occurred starting from Saturday, and very detailed responses in terms of what the facility did running through that week. There was notification delivered to the district promptly and in compliance with the regulatory scheme. And then there was follow-up. And I think the key date that I would point out in terms of some aspects of the good faith findings is that on Thursday, February 15th, there was follow-up with the district inspector, and information was provided to Goodrich at that time concerning filing for a variance. Goodrich has never been before you before to seek a variance. I work with a number of other companies that are very familiar with this process, but Goodrich is not one of those companies. So this was a new procedure to them. And it was then upon learning of the interim variance procedures on Thursday, February 15th, that Goodrich began preparing its variance application on February 16th. And then it was filed on February 23rd. I think if you'll recall, Friday, February 16th was leading into the President's Day holiday. The team worked over the holidays. Our law firm was engaged over that weekend. And again, we filed the interim variance on February 23rd. So again, in terms of the good cause factors, and I always appreciate, when I haven't been before you since COVID, so I was last before you in late 2019, but I always appreciate the fact that you have these in front of us, as well as the health and safety code. In the context of the good cause factors, and you'll hear testimony on this, the permit to operate allows the flare to operate for 13 hours over a rolling 12-month period. And because of this February event that occurred February 6th in that time frame, we are already in violation of this condition. As I mentioned, this flare does not typically operate for more than about 10 minutes or so, really in any given month. And that's why the rolling average is as low as it is. And our expectation going forward is that it will operate in that fashion. There's been root cause analysis done, and work that's being done right now and that has already been concluded to ensure that we don't have a situation where the flare burns for as long a period as it did that's causing us to come before you. So as I mentioned, the February event was caused by an unanticipated solenoid valve failure. We'll talk about that in more detail through the witness testimony. As I mentioned, with respect to the timeline, we've exercised diligence in terms of promptly contacting the district following the February event. And the petition was in fact filed within 4 business days after that February 15th, February 16th discussion with district staff in terms of identifying the potential need to file a variance. And then fourth, the denial of the interim variance, as you'll hear from our witness testimony, would impact Goodrich as, you know, no company is interested in operating in a situation where it could violate a permit. And as I mentioned, this is a very big facility. It works in conjunction with the other Goodrich facilities, landing system facilities across the US. But a shutdown in the context of the April 30th regular variance would have significant impact in terms of that supply chain, in terms of deliveries that are that the facility is contractually obligated to perform, and it would be a loss of significant revenue over that period leading up to the end of April as well. So I mentioned that there's been corrective actions that are taken, and this is consistent, I think, with the discussions that we, Goodrich, have had with district staff and will continue to have with district staff, and we'll talk more about those in the context of the testimony. So I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint so we can focus on the witness testimony, but I'm happy to answer any questions in the context of that opening statement with respect to the good cause factors if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. Reichert.
Thank you. Subject to any additional information provided during testimony, the district is not opposed to the finding of good cause. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll have you present your witnesses. Understand that Exhibit 1 has been presented to us in evidence, and if your witnesses adopt its factual statements, it's evidence subject to any cross-exam by the board or district council, so keep that in mind. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'd like to call Sandra Perez to testify at this point. Thank you. Ms. Perez, you have taken the oath that was given at the outset of the variance hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you state your full name for the record, please?
Yes, my full name is Sandra Maria Perez, but I go by Sandra Perez.
And what's your position at Goodrich?
My position is Environmental Health and Safety Manager. I've been at the site for 2 months. However, I've been working closely with the furnace tech manager, facilities manager, maintenance manager. But I do have a collective 11 years of experience in the areas of environmental health and safety.
And what are your responsibilities as EHS manager?
My responsibilities as EHS manager include ensuring that I identify the risk, ensuring that I develop and implement programs to maintain compliance at the site.
You mentioned that you've been at Goodrich now for 2 months. What kind of positions did you hold prior to that time?
Sure. Prior to that time, I've worked at other aerospace companies and also biopharmaceutical industry.
Okay. And your educational background?
My educational background includes a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Environmental and Occupational Health from California State University, Northridge.
Great. Thank you. So in the context of the variance petition that we're here today to talk about, can you describe the air permits that have been issued by South Coast relative to the Goodrich facility?
Yes, so Goodrich does have 52 South Coast Air Quality Management District permits. Specifically today, we're here to look at the variance request for permit number G30825, which was issued in April of 2014.
And what does that permit authorize Goodrich to do?
That permit would authorize Goodrich to operate an air pollution control system that it is there for the furnaces that has 2 components, an emergency flare and also a boiler exhaust system. But Goodrich is requesting the variance specifically for the operation of the emergency flare.
And what kind of conditions are associated with the operation of that flare pursuant to the permit?
That specific permit does have 10 conditions, and we're today looking specifically requesting a variance for the 3rd condition, which states that we are to run 13 hours during a 12-month rolling period.
And just for the hearing boards, just to make this point, the permit was submitted with the petition, so that should be in the record as well. Okay, so can you describe what Goodrich is requesting today?
Sure. So what we're requesting today is an interim variance to operate the emergency flare beyond the 13-hour that's already on the specific condition before the April 30th public hearing, which is about 2 months away.
And you saw the slides, but I'd appreciate you walking us through, if you would not mind, the steps that you and Goodrich took to exercise diligence in submitting the petition.
Sure. So Goodrich did file a variance petition as soon as feasible. But first, on February 3rd, the night of February 3rd, when I became aware that the solenoid valve had failed, which triggered the flare. After that, shortly, I called the self-reporting policy tool. I was not at home. I was not did not have a computer in front of me, so I did Google the specific website. I did use that website to report. On February 6th is when I followed up to ensure that my report had been obtained. I was referred to District Council Catherine Roberts, who then informed me that I should still call the 1-800 cut smog number. After that, I called the cut smog number at about 1:01 p.m. And they took my information, and I was provided with notification number 780091. It was later that day that I was in contact then with Inspector Katie McCoy. She did give me a call to obtain a little bit more information from Goodrich on the details of the event. From there, Inspector Katie McCoy did provide me information of the report that we needed to submit within the 7 days of making that report. By February 9th is when we submitted the information that was requested. We submitted that via email to Inspector McCoy. From there,
and then
sure.
what happened after that?
Yeah, so right after that, on February 15th is when I was then in contact with Inspector Andrea Barlow. She was very nice and provided a lot more details on what we should be doing next. I did request the information on how we could proceed, knowing and understanding that we already had surpassed our condition. And that's when Andrea provided me the information for the variance.
And then that's sort of when things began to kick into gear with respect to the preparation of the petition. Is that correct?
That is correct. I wasn't too familiar on how to move forward with that, so I requested information from our corporate team, and they became engaged with Buzz to move forward with the information that we needed to proceed.
And just for the record, I introduced myself as Robert Hines, but I go by Buzz. So, all right. And then when did Goodrich file its petition?
We then filed our petition on February 23rd.
Okay, very good. So because of the bifurcation, those are really the good cause factors that we wanted to present with respect to Ms. Perez.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Perez, on February 3rd, is that the time when the flare first came online?
No, the flare first came online on February 2nd, but it wasn't until February 3rd that we discovered that it had been running.
What is the mechanism in place to notify you that the flare has come online?
So first, the mechanic becomes aware that there's an issue. They go into communication with the furnace deck operators. Once the furnace deck operators confirm, the maintenance technicians then communicate with the maintenance manager. And then once the maintenance manager confirms that information, then they report to me.
Is there how is the initial notification? Is there like an alarm, or is there something that, how does the first person find out that the flare is turned on?
Oh, so in this specific event, the mechanic actually had a visual on the flare. We did not receive an alarm on that specific event.
Do you know why?
We will have
Someone else testify? That's
go
fine.
over. Mhm.
Okay. Are you able to, and if this is for someone else too, just let me know. Are you able to figure out when the flare actually turned on, the exact time?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give that to me, or is that someone else's?
Oh, that's someone else's.
Great, thank you. How did you notify, you said that you looked online and you notified the district on the 3rd. What mechanism did you use?
I went online and I went through the self-reporting policy website tool
So it was via email?
via email, correct?
And then when you first spoke with the district inspector on February 6th, did they inform you about the variance procedure at that time?
No, not at that time.
Okay, so the first time that anyone mentioned the variance procedure to you was on February 15th?
That's correct.
Okay, and by that point, you were well beyond your permitted hours, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And have you ever exceeded your flare hours before?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, but you've only been there a long time. I mean, a
Right.
short time.
Short time, yeah, but it's based on the information that we pulled with the team members.
Okay, so how far back are you aware that whether you have, that you
Uh,
haven't?
I don't recall the specific amount of months that we went, but one of my
Someone else
colleagues-
can testify
yes.
to. Great. No further questions for this witness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any redirect, sir?
Not at this time.
Any board questions for the witness, Mr. Ali? Dr. Abraham? Somebody on Jacob? Mohan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Perez, you said you followed up on the February 3rd self-reporting. You didn't get any feedback from the self-reporting, correct?
I did not. That's why I followed up on February 6th because I
6th.
wanted to make sure that something had been received.
And then on February 6th is when you call in the breakdown
Is when I called the 1-800 cut smog number. Yes.
and you reported a breakdown. Is that when you got a notification number, you said?
Correct. I got the notification number for the breakdown report.
Okay, that's 6th, okay. So prior to that, or in your previous job, you were not aware of the interim variance, or the requirement to file for a variance?
No, I've never had to file for interim variance.
And nobody told you in the facility told you about the need to do that?
No, I don't believe anybody was aware of that
Okay.
process.
Okay. The other thing, and as far as you mentioned you looked back at the records and, looking at past breakdown. Is there a format where the company keeps a record of all the hours the flare operates?
Yes, I believe that's also reviewed every year for AER reports, TRI reports.
Is there somebody else who can talk about that format of the report and how they do the rolling, the 12-month rolling
Yes,
evaluation?
yes,
It's not you, but it'll be
No.
somebody. Okay.
correct.
Okay, I'll save my
Mhm.
questions for that. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Call your next witness.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Jeff Irby to the stand, please. Thanks, Mr. Irby. Did you take the oath at the outset of at the start of the hearing this morning?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. And would you please state your full name for the record?
It is Jeffrey Irby. Oh, middle name too.
Okay. And I think you've spelled that already for the
Yeah.
clerk, is that correct?
Yes,
All right.
GEOFFREY.
Thank you. And what's your position at Goodrich?
I'm the furnace tech manager
And how long have you been in that, working in that capacity at Goodrich?
since June of 2022.
Okay, and what other positions have you held at Goodrich?
I've been maintenance manager, interim facilities manager, furnace tech process engineer, site project manager over the past 10 years.
Okay, very good. So total time that you've been at this Goodrich facility is how long?
10 years.
Thank you. And what about your educational background? Can you describe that for the hearing board?
So I have a BS and an MS in electrical engineering from the University of Florida, and I have an MBA from University of Southern California.
Thank you. And then prior to joining Goodrich, did you have work experience at facilities that were operated in a similar fashion?
Somewhat similar. I was at a nuclear facility in South Carolina, Savannah River site, prior to this experience.
And there's something that I think we have talked about called Delta V that you had familiarity with. Is that something that you worked with at SRS?
Yes, correct. That is the brand name for our control system that monitors our processes.
Very good, thank you. So can you describe the role that the furnaces play in the Goodrich facility in the operation process there?
So the furnaces are an integral part of the carbon brake densification process. We get the brakes as carbon fiber discs, which is the consistency of a dry erase marker, if you can remember from elementary school. And then from there, we put those into the furnaces and we densify that with natural gas from the city. From there, I can explain the whole process, but from there, the gas goes through and is combusted inside of the boilers. But the furnaces are the first step of the process. After that, they go through a machining step to get their first round of machining. Then they come back to the furnace deck, get another densification, and then they go back to the machine shop where they get their final features.
And typically those furnaces for a particular product run, how long do they operate?
So they operate for a period of 2 weeks at a time. They're at about a couple thousand degrees and under vacuum. So it's not an immediate shutdown process typically.
Very good. And if you could describe the need and how the emergency flare fits into that overall process for us.
Well, it's an integral part if we have a failure in our primary combustion control system, which is our boilers. So we in line, we have an oil scrubber system, which is another permitted piece of equipment. And then we also have the boiler, which is the primary combustion means for our waste gas. It also acts as a recycler for our waste gas. We only use about 20% of the natural gas from the city in our product. So we use it as a feed gas as well. In an emergency condition, we would rather not have, or it's a very dangerous situation if that waste gas is to bubble or emit from our equipment, causing a LEL condition. And if it were to go up the stack without a flare, then we would have potential violations with NOx and VOCs.
What's an LEL condition? Can you just spell it out
Lower
for us?
explosive limit. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah, we all speak in acronyms sometimes. So again, I mean, the flare is a backup, operates in an emergency fashion. Is that correct?
Absolutely. When we lose the boiler, we need to, at certain points, vent to a flare for usually at the most 10 minutes at a time until we can get everything safely off gas, until we find the root cause of the problem, and then we're able to go back on gas and go through our normal process through the boiler.
And could you provide some information? I mean, this was a very unusual circumstance that occurred. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
This was an event that was not anticipated. We had the process gas run backwards through a furnace that was not operating, which was previously not anticipated. The alarm system that we have installed, we have one on the flare flow, we have one on the flare temperature, we have one on the rolling average, we have one when a furnace is venting to a flare. So at any given time, the operator is alerted the second the flare is being vented to. However, since this problem was unanticipated, there was no indication to the operator that we are venting. It wasn't until a maintenance mechanic noticed visually, as you saw in the initial PowerPoint presentation, about 60 feet in the air, a very small flare that was going off.
And I just want to mention in the context of the interim variance conditions that I think you're familiar with, one of those has to do with now having the valves alarmed. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So we've installed that. We installed that. One of my counterparts is going to testify to the exact date, but that was one of our immediate corrective actions, is to make sure that those failure alarms were activated, and any future condition of this nature would be detected immediately, and it would take 10 minutes or less likely to alleviate the situation.
So I want to move into a little bit of a different but very much related topic. And that concerns the potential violation of this emergency flare permit that we're here seeking the interim variance on. How would you characterize the possibility that we might violate that, Goodrich might violate that permit during the period that we're seeking the interim variance for?
So it's on an emergency basis. We can't predict emergencies. It is an integral part of the system because it's per our furnace running permits that we have to have a active flare. So we would not be able to run. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, so I guess the way to characterize it is that there is that possibility you can't, but it can't be predicted because it runs on an emergency basis.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
The key is detection and then immediate isolation, and then we determine the problem, and then once it's solved, then we go back on gas.
Has there been, has the flare operated since that, I'll call it the February 6th event where it ran undetected for a long period of time? Has it had to operate in that period?
So with the logic, yes, we did have another event on February 16th for 10 minutes where it did vent. The operators were notified. It was another unusual circumstance, but they were able to correct it within 10 minutes, and there was no further venting after that point.
So there was an alarm that went off on that and it was detected?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just, I mean, in terms of the potential denial of an interim variance, you've talked about how these systems work together. What would be the effect on air quality?
So if we did not have the interim variance, we would not be able to control VOCs in an emergency event. We would have an immediate potential impact to the immediate public, as well as LEL or lower explosive limit conditions inside of the plant. So safety and environmental impacts.
And we've seen a picture in the slides that I presented during my opening. Is that an accurate depiction of the flare? Can you describe the flare just in terms of its physically, what it looks like consistent with that picture?
Yes, so if you're looking at the flare, it's a tube that's connected to our system, and then it has a pilot that's connected right to it that's constantly lit. So when waste gas comes through there, the pilot ignites the waste gas, and that determines that our flare is in operation when the waste gas is ignited.
And what's the approximate diameter of the flare?
I believe it's 1.5 to 2 inches.
Okay, so it's not large. It's
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think in the context of good cause, those are the questions that I have for Mr. Irby at this point in time. Thank you.
Ms. Reichert?
Sit tight.
Thank you. So if any of these questions are not for you, just let me know. So did you say that you know when the flare actually turned on, the actual time?
My counterpart's gonna,
Great.
yes.
Do you know how long it was active for?
So through the February 2nd and 3rd events, which were tied to the same malfunction, it was 16 hours.
16 hours, okay. And how long from the time of discovery did it take to repair the situation that caused the flare to be needed?
So we took it off gas the second that it was reported from the mechanic that we were flaring. It wasn't corrected, but it wasn't used by that same system until 11 p.m. So once we determined what the issue was and was corrected, I believe it was 11 p.m. My counterpart will testify to the exact time.
So as soon as you were notified, you were able to take the flare offline and stop the gas flow, then you could fix the issue and then put the whole system back online. Okay, so the real failure then in terms of having the flare go on for so long was the alarm not alerting on time so that you could stop?
Correct.
Okay. And the alarms have been fixed?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know what happened? Why the alarms weren't working?
So they were not enabled in our system. It's part of the default programming that the failure of the valve was just not enabled. They are on some valves are not. This is a valve leading to the system. It's not a valve even in line with the flare per se. So it was not thought that this was actually a condition that could be.
That would trigger the flare?
Yeah, exactly.
So has there been, this is probably off track for good cause, but since I'm on it, I'm just gonna go, if you'll give me just leeway for another question. Has the whole system been looked at with that kind of view to make sure that now we've covered all the valves so that this won't happen again?
Yes, correct.
Great. Thank you for that additional leeway. I have no further questions for this witness.
Any redirect, sir?
Yes, one question. When you talk about the software system that runs the operations, that's the Delta V system, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's
That you have a lot of experience with from your prior position?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, Mohan?
Yeah. Thank you, morning, Mr. Jeffrey. I didn't get your last name. What was that?
Irby, IRBY.
IRB. Okay. I'll call you Mr. Irby then. I think you mentioned there is a scrubber system.
Yes.
Before it goes. So does the process gas go to the scrubber system and then to the boiler, correct?
Correct.
And if there's a failure of the boiler, the process gas is routed after the scrubber system to the flare or before?
The process gas is before the boiler. So if there's a problem with either the boiler or the scrubber, the furnace shuts off gas automatically through interlocks, and you would not be getting gas going through that system.
So my question is, in this case, the scrubber system was working.
Yep.
There was a problem with the boiler, the solenoid valve. Something was wrong with the boiler?
There was not a problem with the boiler in this case. There was a furnace that we were doing our testing on that we do prior to a run, and a valve did not close that would normally go to the boiler, but it created a line that allowed the gas from another furnace to go through the boiler into the flare line.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's
all right. I'm trying to picture. So it did go through the scrubbing system.
absolutely
It did go, but it didn't go to the boiler.
correct.
Okay. Instead went to the flare.
Yes.
So in normal, let's say if the boiler is not operating, the gas would be scrubbed before it goes to the flare.
In normal operation.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not normal. Let's say if there's a failure at the boiler for whatever reason,
Yes.
the boiler is shut down. The gas that goes to the flare, is that scrubbed?
Yes.
So, okay. And how, when you said on the February 2nd and 3rd, you had 16 hours, how is that hours? How did you get the hours?
So my counterpart will testify to that, but they actually went in and determined this wasn't an event that we had seen before. So they had to do some research to determine how waste gas would make it to the flare in this circumstance. And that's how they found that a valve had failed. And from there, they looked at the condition, and they also determined based on the temperature of how long the flare was venting for.
So there's no timer?
There is a timer, but the timer is activated based on a direct line from a furnace to the flare, because that is the most common, or during our PHA, that is the way that we found that gas will be vented to the flare.
Okay. So otherwise it doesn't, the timer doesn't get activated.
Correct.
So has that been corrected now so that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's all the question I had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Samaniego?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to clarification on the issue was why the person that was notified or observed that the flares were operating, because an alarm did not notify anybody. Is that why?
Yes.
And I'm hearing that that alarm has been repaired?
Correct.
Okay,
The alarm didn't exist for this condition, so it was created to now show the new failure mode.
okay, yeah, that's where I was not understanding because
Yes.
you had all these alarms in place.
Exactly, yeah.
And the person that saw it just happened to physically see it because there was no notification, is what I heard from the previous witness.
Correct.
Okay, okay, that's good. Now, you're exceeding the 13 hours already,
Yes,
and you're still operating?
correct.
Okay, and then you had another event on the 16th.
Yes.
Okay, and so I don't know how that works. So if you're already in violation and you know and you're concerned, but you're still operating, knowing that you're going to continually violate, right? That's the circumstances that you're in right now, because you don't want to shut down. I understand the circumstances of shutting down, but you're just continually operating, knowing that you're already in violation.
That there is a potential to violate again, exceeding over the hours for the year, yes.
Okay. And I guess I'll have that. I'm done. That's fine. Thank you.
Dr. Abraham? Mr. Ali?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Pearman, do you have, no, I did have a follow-up. Do you know the reason why there's a limit on 13 hours for the flare operation?
We do have a limit, but I would have to have one of my counterparts testify to exactly why that limit was created.
That's right. Now, one of your slides on the good cause factors, it says that typically you must use the flare 10 to 20 minutes every month. Now, I'm hearing contrary saying that it's never been used before, but why is that statement there? You must use it 10 to 20 minutes every month. Is that typical?
It's an average based off of our previous year's rolling average, which was around 0.8 hours. It's not a mandatory, we have to use it 10 to 20. It's just, it happens to be used 10 to 20 minutes because we have boilers go off gas, we have power outages that take the equipment off unexpectedly. So to prevent a LEL condition on site or emission of the gas locally unabated, we send it to the flare.
Okay. Permit that you supplied with the petition, it vents the 14 ceramic vapor deposition furnaces. So
correct.
Only one furnace was the culprit that caused it to flare, and the other, I don't know if all 14 were operating at that time, but the boiler was handling most of the process gas.
Correct. So there were several furnaces on gas at this point, and they all operate a few thousand SCFH of flammable gas. The furnace in question with the valve failure was in line from other two furnaces where some was diverted from the boiler, where normally the boiler pulls it, but there is a path of least resistance that some went through the flare, with the most actually going to the boiler.
Okay.
During that time.
All right. Thank you. I have further questions.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Thank you. Goodrich will call Timothy Fong next. Good morning, Mr. Fong. Go ahead.
Morning.
Did you take the oath this morning when we started the interim variance hearing?
Yes.
And can you state your name for the record, please? Your full name?
Timothy Fong. Yes. Timothy.
And F-O-N-G.
Yeah, F-O-N-G last name.
All right, thank you. And what's your position at Goodrich?
My current position is maintenance manager.
Okay, and what are your responsibilities as maintenance manager?
I am responsible for the maintenance team, as well as the instrumentation team, also the control system administrator, and also in charge of physical security at the site.
Okay. And how long have you been with Goodrich?
About 8.5 years.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about some of the various positions that you've held over those 8.5 years?
Yes, I've worked in various departments at Goodrich as a manufacturing engineer in the machine shop, furnace tech, and facilities. I've also worked as the instrumentation supervisor, and finally, in my current position as a maintenance manager for 1.5 years.
Thank you. And what's your educational background, Mr. Fong?
I have a BS in industrial engineering,
And where'd you get that from?
Cal Poly Pomona.
Okay, right nearby.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And before you joined Goodrich, what was your work experience in some of those capacities?
I've collectively worked 5 years in the aerospace manufacturing sector.
Okay, thank you. So you've been here listening to testimony and my opening, but testimony from your colleague, Ms. Perez, and then your colleague, Mr. Irby. Can you describe, and you've also heard some of the questions, I think some of the, I'll call them holes that we're trying to fill in the context of what exactly occurred. And you were really there kind of front and center. So can you talk to us about those events that I think from your perspective may have begun on Saturday, February 3rd in the evening, and what you observed and what you did at that particular point in time?
Sure. So on Saturday, February 3rd, about 7:30 p.m., the on-site maintenance technician reported that the flare appeared to be in operation and actively venting process gas. And to stop this, he immediately found one valve that was open to the flare, and he closed it manually. However, this valve that was open to the flare was to the furnace that was not even in operation, which is what prompted me to do a deeper investigation. So I actually remoted into our control system from my laptop at home to conduct a further analysis of the data.
What did you find when you remoted in?
What I found was I first looked at the alarm history, and there was no alarm, no failure alarm, no alarm for the flare timer going off, and no alarms for the flare venting. And so, which prompted me to do a further investigation. I also I knew what time that the valve was closed, when the mechanic closed the valve. So I looked at data relative, what was the condition right before it closed and right after it closed, and looking for any data, looking at various process variables, that are associated with the flare system, boiler system, various systems, and looking for any correlation to that time when it closed.
And what did you find?
And I did find correlation to the flare flow. So when these sets of valves were closed, the flare flow dropped off. So it was flowing at 1,000 SCFH, and when this valve was closed, it dropped to 0. And then from there, to prove that correlation, I just went back further and further in the timeline to look for more instances of this occurring. And I did find several instances where when the valve was open, we had about 1,000 SCFH of gas flow to the flare. And when it closed, the gas flow went away.
So you've described this to me in our work together over the course of the last couple of weeks as a failure of the valve being open. Is that right?
Yes, the valve had a solenoid that failed open, so it was constantly supplying compressed air to the air actuated valve to keep it open.
Very unusual circumstance. Is that how you describe it?
Yes, very, very unusual. Typically, you would see if it does fail, it would fail close. It would actually shut the air off to it, and the valve would actuate to a safe state. So it would actually close the valve instead of keeping it open.
And had you ever seen that kind of a condition occur at the facility before?
No, I have not.
So if you could just take us through a little bit more of the investigation, and you isolated the solenoid valve as the cause of the failure. What occurred next in terms of some of your work and your investigation and your work with the other team members at Goodrich?
So yeah, as I gone back further and further in the timeline, I realized, we have gone over potentially the 13-hour limit. So that's when we first discovered the potential compliance issue, and that I brought in the furnace deck manager in the loop for further analysis and because he had process knowledge of the furnaces.
And that's Mr. Irby,
Yeah,
correct?
that is Mr. Irby.
Okay.
And then after further analysis, we finally concluded that based on the data that we saw, it appeared that we have vented for about 16 hours. And at that point around, it was like 9:20 p.m. We reported it to the environmental health and safety manager.
That's Ms. Perez.
Ms. Perez, yes.
And your understanding is at that point, Ms. Perez then reported it to South Coast
Yes,
in the manner that she testified.
Yes, at 9:50 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what happened next?
So so basically, as we were conducting my investigation, the maintenance mechanic was doing his troubleshooting and discovered the valve issue, discovered the failed solenoid, and he went and repaired it. He replaced the solenoid at approximately 11 p.m.
Okay. And this is obviously of great interest to the hearing board, and it's been of great interest to Goodrich as well. Could Goodrich have detected the valve failure or seen that the valve was going to fail at any point in time before it did so?
No, Goodrich could not have anticipated this. This particular scenario where the gas backflow from one system into another system line was unanticipated, unforeseen scenario. So we did not program in those failure alarms that would actually had detected this and allow us to catch this issue earlier.
And in the context of those failure alarms, I think Mr. Irby testified that the default is not to engage in that alarm for such a scenario. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah. So based on the process hazard analysis, if we would have foreseen this scenario in there, we would have programmed in. But we don't want to program in too many of these alarms, as it would cause nuisance alarms and overwhelm the control room operators.
Okay. And I presented testimony, or not testimony, in the context of the slides, but this is a facility, is it not, that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Is that correct?
That is correct. We have control room operators in the monitoring the various equipments 24/7.
And how many operators are in the control room at any given time?
There is at least one, typically 2 operators in there.
Okay. And anything else you want to add in the context of the failure of the valve and just this particular scenario that we've been talking about in terms of Goodrich's response?
Yes, we as part of we have a maintenance a preventive maintenance plan that actually checks these valves after every run, which is approximately 1 to 2 times a month. And during those cases, we did not find any issues with these valves.
And can you describe that process a little bit?
Yes, basically the process involves a maintenance mechanic going out in the field to the valve and then calling up into the control room to have them open and close the valve, and he would visually verify that the valve is functional out in the field.
And again, I think you just testified to this, but just to emphasize, this particular valve was tested in that context. Is that correct?
Yes, this valve was tested and we have records of it being tested.
Okay. And valves are replaced at the facility in the context of these operations, when and how often? What's the trigger for replacement of a valve?
As needed, as we do these tests and if we do find issues, they will be replaced.
Okay.
Immediately.
And I think there's manufacturers' recommendations associated with the life of the valve. Can you describe sort of what you see in that context?
Yes, the manufacturer recommends the valve has a useful life of 3 to 10 years, depending on usage and the environment.
But the manufacturer doesn't necessarily recommend that after 3 years you just replace them, right? If it's working well?
No, it depends on a variety of factors. That's why we test these valves regularly.
Okay, great. So I think we've talked about the content. This particular testimony that you've just offered, I think, goes into the issue of, could Goodrich have anticipated the valve failure? uh, and we've talked also about the standard operating procedure of testing the valves. You were involved, I think, in the context of working very closely with Mr. Irby and Ms. Perez to ensure that the variance petition was filed in a timely fashion. Can you just describe a little bit about how you worked with your colleagues and acted in a diligent fashion to get the variance on file?
Sure. As soon as I heard about the incident, I remoted in immediately that same night, and we began the investigation. And we wrapped up, determined the causes and the hours within, an hour or so of the first sighting of the issue.
Okay, very good. I don't have any further questions for you with respect to the good cause findings.
Ms. Reichert, how long would your cross-exam take? We want to take a short morning break fairly soon.
I have no questions for this witness, so let's take a break.
All right, we'll take a 10-minute break before the board has any questions.
Record, Dave.
Thank you. I'm wanting to understand your alarms. I know the alarm well, there was no alarm for this particular incident. And it was physically seen that the system, the flares were on. But I thought I heard in testimony earlier that you had all the existing alarms, you do have an alarm for the flare. So when the flare is operating, the alarm goes off. That's how you determine the time that the flare is operating to meet your condition. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so are you saying that alarm failed as well?
Yes, that particular alarm logic did not account for this backflow scenario, so that has been corrected now.
I don't understand what you said. It didn't account for the backflow, but when that was the new alarm that you put in, but you do have an alarm for the flares when they go off.
Oh, no, we actually modified that alarm for the flare to include this particular scenario.
Prior to the incident, you have an alarm that tells or notifies you when the flares are operating.
Yes.
Okay.
But that alarm actually goes off. It has three conditions in it. One of it is when that particular furnace is in operation, so we're flowing gas. Second condition is it's open to the flare, and the third condition is open to the piping system. So in this case, it did not go off because the furnace that had the valve failure in the piping system was not actually online, so it was not on gas. So that flare alarm never triggered. The gas actually came from another furnace.
I'm sorry. I am confused. I understand the incident was an unexpected incident because the gas backflowed into another system. But how does that impact the alarm to the flare? Why would it be under a condition that flare? In simple understanding, you've got the 1.5 inch flare, and to meet the AQMDs or your permit conditions, the minute that flare goes on, irrespective of other conditions, I would think that you have that alarm just goes on or off once that flare is triggered.
So how the alarm is set up is actually based on those factors that the furnace is running and that we're open to the flare. It's actually just looking at valve positions. There's no trigger for it to say that the flare is on. We basically determine that the flare is on based on a variety of valve positions. Oh, if these sets of valves are open, that means we are open to the flare and we are flowing gas to the flare.
Okay, now I understand. So it's really the flare alarm will not go on even if it's on, even if the flare is on, because a valve is shut off. The flare is dependent on the valves.
Valve position,
The
yes.
flare is triggered by the valves going on and off, not by the flare. So
yes. The logic is based on the valve position.
why is that? Don't you want to know when? So it doesn't. I don't understand your reporting. Then, if the flare is going on, it's not based on the flare. It's based on a valve being open or shut.
Yes.
It's not actually a flare emission.
Well,
Isn't there another valve? I'm not an engineer, but I would be concerned that, I mean, if you would want actual conditions of the actual flare burning. Do you have a valve for the pilot light is always on?
yes.
Okay. And when the flare is in operation, is there a change in that system?
No, the pilot stays on all the time, no matter.
And it reaches the
1400,
1400.
above 1400 degrees.
So that's always on.
Yes.
So okay. So now I'm understanding. So then the valves are what releasing the gas into that system.
Yes, at least releasing gas into
Okay.
the
So
flare
it's-
piping.
Okay, that clears it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Fong, What is the current hours on the flare operation total now?
Last I checked, it was about, I think 0.8 something hours, less than an hour.
No, total. I mean, you got 16 hours, you said February 2nd and 3rd. For the month of February, what was the total?
So you mean what's in the control system right now?
Yeah.
So in the control system, actually never accounted for that 16 hours.
Okay. So where do you, because you're supposed to keep a log, right? A monthly running. It's a 12-month rolling.
Yes.
So where do you keep that log?
So that log's actually kept automatically in the control system.
So that 16 hours is not accounted in there.
Yes, because the logic that triggers that timer again did not account for this particular scenario because it's looking basically at those valve positions again.
Right. So it depended on you doing research back when the
Yes.
valves were open and shut to determine how long it was open and get the hours basically.
Yeah, I basically looked at valve position and also flow to the flare. So combination of those variables is how I determined these 16 hours.
Okay, so now you've determined it's 16 hours, plus there was another incident on the 16th, I believe, 10 minutes, so it's 16 plus hours.
Yes.
Where's that logged? And because you have to keep a running log, 12-month log, right, rolling total. Where is that? Why is that not logged in at 16 hours in the spreadsheet or whatever you're using?
So if we were to put those 16 hours in, it would shut off operations right away because we have interlocks on our furnace operations that would interlock it if we exceed 13 hours.
Okay.
So if we were to record that right now, we would be shutting operations down immediately.
Right. Okay. And I understand that, but you keep it separately then in a spreadsheet or something?
Yeah, right now we have it in a spreadsheet.
On a
Yes,
spreadsheet.
we export that data and we have it
in a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Because that is not tied into your logic. So that wouldn't shut down your.
Yeah, so we would not shut down right now. So once we get once we do the permit modifications and whatnot, we would then put the data back in.
Okay. Do you happen to know the reason why there was a limit of 13 hours?
I do not know.
Okay. One last question. When you say the operator found out that the flare was operating, closed it manually, where did the flow go then?
To the boiler.
To the boiler.
Yeah,
So
the
that
boilers were online, were running in operation, full operation.
routed back to the boiler.
Yeah, we basically went back to where it should go, which is to the boilers.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Mr.
Any redirect or recourse? Thank you, sir.
Just a little bit of redirect. Mr. Fong, we talked a little bit about the design of these valves. Can you, and I think it goes to the very good questions that the hearing board was just asking. Can you describe how these valves are actually designed and the failure associated with the valve and in that context?
Sure. So we specifically designed these valves. We picked certain valves that fail closed, certain valves that fail open. So in this particular valve that fail open, it was actually designed to fail closed. So we simply spec this valve. So when it loses air, it fails closed. It fails to a safe state.
And that really goes to the logic that was you were describing in the context of Delta V and the software program that operates.
Yes,
is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other witnesses? You concluded.
We could call Mr. Ruiz if there are if there's further information that the hearing board would like to hear with respect to the good cause factors. But I'll take my cue from you. I think we've presented sufficient evidence to establish good cause, but if you need to hear more from the site manager in terms of lost revenue, we could certainly present that.
Thank you. Do you feel the need to cross-examine that witness, Ms. Reichert?
I do not.
Any board members are concerned about that issue?
No, I believe we move directly to good cause, establish a good cause, so we can button it up.
And he would testify to lost revenue, you said, based
He
on
would,
that aspect.
yes, yes.
Any question for that witness from the board?
Well, I all I had with that before we bring the witness up, it's just to talk to the chair. The only question I wanting to hear is they're still in operation, so there's no loss going on, is what I'm understanding. So I didn't know how they establish a loss. That was my question.
Well, I think what they mean is if we didn't grant it, they would lose revenue. Or that's one reason why.
Okay, oh, that's fine.
That February 16th event, just for the record, that occurred prior to the filing of the petition for an interim variance.
All right, then are you finished with your witnesses then?
Yes.
Any closing statements? First from you, sir.
Very, very briefly. So good cause factors, the permit to operate allows Goodrich to operate that flare for 13 hours over the rolling period. I think what you've heard is number one, that we're in violation of that condition, giving rise to the filing of the petition. The records that we've testified to show that this was a extremely atypical event. And Mr. Fong, I think, just emphasized that because these valves are designed to fail closed, not failed open, and it went into a vessel that was not operating and giving rise to the issue. That really kind of covers that second factor. This was caused by an unanticipated, never before seen failure of the solenoid valve in that open position. It was within its recommended lifespan. I think you've heard testimony with respect to how those valves are tested after each use and each run. And then third, I think we've presented testimony sufficient to establish that Goodrich exercised diligence in the context of promptly investigating, because again, this was not something that had been seen before. And then very promptly upon that discovery, there was contact with the district following the event. And then once Goodrich understood that the proper avenue to address these issues was the filing of a petition, they did act diligently. It was only a matter of about 4 business days before the petition for interim variance was filed. And then we just talked about that fourth factor, which is that in the context of the denial of an interim variance, there would be an adverse impact to Goodrich because of the potential for a facility shutdown. So thank you.
Ms. Reichert.
The district is not opposed to the finding of good cause. Thank you.
All right, I'll make a motion first, and if we have a second, we can have deliberations. Motion would be that in this matter involving case 62531 for facility 11998 Goodrich Corporation, that we find that in terms of the bifurcated proceedings, that good cause exists to proceed to the interim variance hearing based upon the fact that while it was less than normal public notice, they satisfy the good cause factors. In terms of being in violation already of a condition rule, the action causing this was an unanticipated event that they were not liable for by any negligence. They exercised due diligence in promptly contacting the district and seeking this variance, and denying it would result in an unreasonable, unavoidable adverse impact, namely the shutdown of this facility. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, move for discussion. Any discussion? Mr. Balakapan?
Yes, I believe the 3 of the findings can be easily made. I know they are in violation of the permit condition. They've exceeded the 13 hours. Circumstances we have heard, they was not anticipated. They've been doing monthly maintenance check and on the valves and so forth. The denial will cause an adverse impact of petitioner. The part on the diligence in petitioning, I agree. I think Ms. Perez was diligent in calling and reporting it, and then when she didn't hear, she followed up with and then did the breakdown notice. However, I just want and then when the inspector told to file for the variance, that's when it. However, the burden is really on the facility to not wait for the inspector to say you have to file. It should be filed when you know in violation. But so that I just want to bring that out, even though on this case, it's the first time and this has occurred. So I think on a case by case basis, I'm willing to sort of overlook the fact that they were diligent, but not as diligent as they should have been. But other than that, I think I can still agree in finding good cause and moving to the interim variance.
Further deliberation or comment? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Dr. Abraham,
Aye.
Mr. Samaniego,
Aye.
Mr. Valakapon,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. All right, so then we can move on to the second phase for the interim variance. If there's some objection by the parties, we can incorporate by reference the evidence and testimony from the first phase. Is that agreed?
That's agreed.
Agreed.
So in your presentation, you can keep that in mind. Also note, Dr. Agram has kind of a soft departure time at 11:30, so just keep that in mind as well.
Okay.
If not, Mr. Hines, please proceed with a brief opening statement on this second phase. Thank you.
Sure. So the 6 factors within the Health and Safety Code 42352, necessary findings that the hearing board needs to make to grant the interim variance are as follows: that the petitioner is or will be in violation. I think that's been established through the good cause proceedings based on the testimony of the witnesses that we've presented. Conditions beyond the reasonable control of petitioner requiring compliance denial of the variance would result in an unreasonable taking, practical closing. We can present a little bit more testimony on that just so that it's in the record, but I think that's been established and accepted as well by the hearing board. I would also add just something for the record. There's an interesting phrase in that particular provision B about public agencies, and I'm not at all suggesting that Goodrich is a public agency, but with respect to the types of business that they're engaged in and the importance to the aerospace industry, including the military, I just want to make that really it's more of an analogy and an observation. They don't constitute a public agency, but I think in keeping with the spirit of the statute, that's a consideration that I would ask the hearing board to make. Corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. We'll call Ms. Perez to talk a little bit more about this, but the flare is a pollution, an emergency pollution control device. It's working in concert with the boilers, and the flare provides an important factor to control emissions and protect public health. So that will be a brief bit of testimony that we will present. And then the final 3 conditions to curtail that Goodrich has given consideration to curtailing operations in lieu of obtaining the variance. But as I mentioned, the importance to the supply chain, to delivery, contractual commitments, and to the aerospace landing system industry as a whole, I think weighs in favor of the granting of a variance in that context as well. Ms. Perez will also testify that in the context of reducing and managing emissions to the maximum extent possible during the variance period, that we will work directly, cooperatively, and in a coordinated fashion with district staff. And we've already been able to do that thanks to the good work of Ms. Reichert and her group, and have agreed to conditions that would be made a part of the order that we would look to the hearing board to grant with respect to the interim variance. And then finally, we will monitor and quantify emission levels should it be necessary to operate the emergency flare. That's also one of the agreed upon conditions. So that's my opening statement. Thank you.
And just to clarify, at this point, what's Exhibit A, the interim variance conditions are stipulated to by the petitioner?
They are.
Thank you. Ms. Reichert?
Thank you. Subject to the testimony presented and compliance with the proposed conditions, the district is not opposed to the granting of this variance. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hines, call your witness.
Okay, Ms. Perez, could you take the stage?
And Ms. Perez, you're still under oath.
And you are still under oath. Did you hear that?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. So I think really what I want to focus on, especially given rise to the soft departure time, could you testify with respect to the work that's been done in concert with the district to agree on the conditions?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about those? And I think in particular, just affirm that those conditions are acceptable and they will be met?
Yes, so we have been communicating directly with our inspector, Andrea Barlow, and we are following direction and providing documentation that has been required, and we will be working closely with AQMD inspectors to ensure that we meet all the conditions, interim variance conditions.
And is it accurate to say that the flare will be operated only in emergency capacity if necessary on a going forward basis?
That is correct.
And is it also fair to say that your experience in the context of your role as EHS manager and in working with Mr. Fong, Mr. Irby, as well as Mr. Ruiz and your colleagues and your EHS cohort, that the conditions are acceptable and that you'll work with the district to ensure that they are met?
Yes.
And as well, Goodrich will be monitoring to quantify emission levels should it be necessary to operate the emergency flare on a going forward basis?
Yes, Goodrich will be ensuring to do that.
And you'll work in very close concert with Mr. Fong, given the testimony associated with how typically the flare hours are recorded and how the 16 hours has really been recorded separately. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. We actually do a management of change review to ensure that the changes are working as we discussed.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Brackett, any?
No questions.
Ms. Parrish, just on the condition let me take the condition number 3, the Exhibit A. I think you mentioned a management of change, and you're keeping a separate spreadsheet or separate sheet with the operating hours. Now, and that includes the 12-month rolling hours?
Yes, so we do have a spreadsheet that has the 16 hours, and then we have the timer from Delta V that is recording the additional time. But we will use a spreadsheet that accounts for all of the information required.
Right, and you're aware of the 12-month, you have to then also show records for each month, a 12-month period. Is that what you have also?
Yes, I believe so.
And so that you, okay. Okay, and I think, I was going to propose later that we add that log, the 12-month rolling period also, not only just the date and operation, but also whatever log, whatever record you're keeping showing the 12-month operating period,
Sure.
Because as you go forward, the next month, you drop 1 month, you add a month, because that's rolling, correct? That's your understanding?
I would need to confirm that, but I believe that's how we've been tracking that.
Tracking that, okay.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned you didn't know why the 13 hours limitation was on your permit. And I didn't hear anybody else also, and maybe I can ask the district staff why the 13 hours was imposed, because that's a strict condition. And which brings me to number 5, condition number 5, reporting excess emission. I think in your petition, actually, it is mentioned there's VOC and toxic air contaminants been emitted that has been controlled by both the oil scrubber and the boiler normally.
Yes.
However, when you're routing it to the flare, I think you reported in the petition excess emission from NOx. Are you aware of excess emission from the toxic air contaminant that may be emitted because it's not as efficient as going through the boiler?
I do not. I would have to work with our consultant to.
Okay. So at this point, your excess emission is about 0.396 pounds per day if the days you operate the flare when you're comparing with the boiler. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we'll be using the same calculation unless we're advised otherwise, to continue to calculate each time that we operate the flare.
And are there any sort of sensitive receptors around your facility? Are there residences, schools nearby?
We do have a risk management plan.
No, that's not my question. Are they are there any schools or
Yes.
how far is the school?
I would have to check with my colleagues. I don't remember the exact mileage. Up 1,000 feet? Okay,
Within 1,000 feet?
yes.
Okay.
More than.
More than, it's more than.
More than, yes.
Okay, she,
Oh, I'm sorry, more than 1,000.
More than
feet,
1,050
yes.
feet, okay. And is it a residential commercial area or is it just a?
That is, it's a combination of, half of it is industrial, but there's also a residential area within that community.
Okay. Um, All right. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I too am interested in the 13 hours, and maybe the district staff can help us with that, because I think that is important in this particular interim. I'm hearing that you've been curtailing operations, doing different things to try to correct this. And one thing I didn't see is I read that you have a yearly annual inspection of the operations. And but then I heard from Mr. Irby that there's more frequent inspections on the valves, et cetera, which is good. But it just seems like a year annual inspection seems like it's a long time when you're here at the emergency thing can happen any time for an event and you only have 13 hours. It seems, so I don't know, I would just ask that maybe you look into that. I don't know what all your inspections are annually, but I think Mr. Irby's part, those inspections are very critical, and I understand they're doing them once every month or 2 months, it seems like. So, but I'm wanting to hear more on the 13 hours. I want to see how the impact is and what we're doing. And are you asking? You're asking for to increase, but how many hours are you asking to increase these 13 hours? What is your request?
So right now we're just evaluating, and we are working with our consultant to see, what is more feasible. And in terms of the corrective actions for preventative maintenance, I know my colleagues testified that we have between runs, and we also have annual PMs during shutdown. And that is also a corrective action that I have asked the team members to evaluate what's a PM frequency that would be, part of the root cause investigation. What would be a better PM to add into our mechanical integrity programs? So that is something that we're evaluating as well.
So you're requesting additional hours, but you don't know how many hours yet, what you're asking.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, with your curtailing operations, and let's just say, because that's what I think about, what if AQMD, you can't go beyond the 13 hours because of whatever the limitation reasons are, and you don't want to shut down, and we don't want you to shut down either. What are you going to do?
So at that point, we would have to speak to our leadership team and come up with a conclusion of what to do, whether shut down or, but that would be beyond, me and our site. That would include our corporate leaders.
Okay. Because I think that 13-hour has a significant issue for your decisions. There are different types of flares out there in this world, aren't there? So and there are flares that would not release NOx also, aren't there, out there? That you wouldn't have to have a limitation of 13 hours. It would just kick on, and you're okay with a condition because there's no emissions from that flare. So there are some options out there. I don't know what those costs are, but maybe your company is at a point to where you can't rely on a 13-hour limitation. So anyway, I rest my questions for now. Thank you.
Dr. Abraham? Mr. Ali?
Nothing further.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other witness you want to call, sir?
No.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Reichert, was there any other of the petitioner's witnesses you wish to examine in this phase?
No.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Chair, I would like to know from a witness why the 13 hours was imposed.
From petitioner's witness?
No, from the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me. Can you answer that? Yeah, the district calls Kate Kim. Oh, there you go.
Ms. Kemp, you were sworn in before? All right, please state and spell your name and title for the record, please.
Kate Kim, Katekim, Senior Air Quality Engineer at the South Coast Air Quality Management District.
Great, thank you. And just to confirm while you're on the mic, that you did take the oath this morning?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. And can you explain why the 13-hour limit is on the permit for this flare?
Yes, it looks like the permit was originally issued. The permit to construct for this flare was originally issued in March of 1998 with the condition allowing them to operate up to 250 hours per month. But at the time of permit evaluation, the facility claimed 99.99% benzene control efficiency, which was not verified at the time of PC evaluation, permit to construct evaluation. So the permit to construct, after the flare was constructed, the facility was requested to perform a source test to verify that the claimed control efficiency. And the facility performed the health risk assessment based on the proved benzene control efficiency, and it determined that they could only operate up to 13 hours per year without exceeding the health risk analysis threshold.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Hines, any questions for that witness?
No, thank you.
All right, board members, Mrs. Santiago, go ahead.
Yes,
Santiago, I'm sorry.
that's fine. Samaniego. So, and help me understand, I guess, initially they were for 250 hours with this existing same system.
Yes, but the 250 hours was calculated preliminarily during the permit to construct evaluation based on the benzene control efficiency of 99.99%, which was unverified at that time. That's why the facility had to perform source test following the issuance of the permit to construct, and based on the new control efficiency that they proved via source tests, they had to re-perform the health risk analysis and update the permit limit accordingly.
And may I ask, why wasn't it verified?
Because during the permit to construct evaluation, the flare was not yet constructed. So
Okay.
the engineer probably had to depend on the facility's claim that the system will be able to achieve 99.99%.
Okay. So currently, they're asking for beyond 13 hours, and it's already a health risk beyond the 13 hours. So is it feasible for a permit condition to be extended with an existing health risk?
Can you repeat the question one more
Yes,
time?
yes. So in your statement, the limitation of 13 hours was established because beyond 13 hours with the existing emissions, there would be a health risk to the public with any additional emissions beyond 13 hours, is my understanding. So the applicant here is asking, and we don't know how many hours yet or what they're asking, but they're asking to go beyond 13 hours. And the way I hear that is they're, if they go beyond, and they have gone beyond, if they go beyond 13 hours or approved, would the district approve, or how would the district go about evaluating this type of a request? I guess that's a good question to ask. How, when you know they're already at a health risk at beyond 13 hours.
Well, I just want to clarify the question because we're being asked to grant a variance. So one of the factors is whether doing something else, which would cause the closing of that line of business, they couldn't use it, is without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. So we recognize there might be some excess emissions if we take that action, but everything else overrides it. So it's not really the district's call now, it's our call to say, notwithstanding that going over 13 might have some negative air quality impacts, we think they're entitled to the variance. I believe their plan is, and it's in the regular petition, to perhaps seek a new permanent condition that makes the 13 no longer the limit, but says it should be 20 or 25, but we're not at that stage yet. Am I stating the question correctly there, as you know?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I understand now. And I have no further questions.
Yeah, morning, Ms. Kim. Do you know that health rate that was done, was it what level, tier 2, tier 4?
I wasn't able to locate the actual health risk analysis file in the scan that I'm looking at, so I will have to take a deeper look at it.
Okay, so would it be fair to assume that because they're going beyond the 13, there may be some benzene being emitted also besides NOx during this variance period?
I would have to double check, but it appears that the reason they had to reanalyze the health risk was due to the benzene.
Benzene, okay. All right, and you don't know, you don't have the sources results or anything showing the hourly rate or anything like that, do you?
If we can just give her a minute so she can look it up for you. This would take like a good amount of time for her to dig up for you. If it's important, we'd need to take a break so she could.
No, that's okay. I think I know what,
Okay.
I can propose as a condition so that in the interim, they can investigate into it.
Okay,
Without,
thank you.
And when you come for the regular variance, we can dig further into it. Hopefully we'll have the information by then.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Ali, Dr. Abraham? All right. Any questions for that witness? Or I forgot to ask?
No further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kim. Appreciate it. And no other witnesses for the district?
No other witnesses.
All right, we'll move to closings. You want to leave now? You got. So, Dr. Abraham have to leave. Would you object if we continued and made our ruling with only 4 members present, Mr. Hines?
I would not object. And I don't have just for the record, I don't have a closing beyond the statements that I've already made. I think I've covered my closing in my opening, and I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Reich, any objection?
No objection.
I have no objection.
I can do a quick motion if you like to. Before you got a few minutes, Mr. Abraham, before you leave. For deliberation too. I think if that's okay. Oh,
Okay, well,
We can waive closing.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
fine. All right. Good way of closing. Then just questions I have. First, Ms. Reichert, then appreciate that you waived closing both parties. Did you have any preference based on practice as to how to fill in the date on item 5 of Exhibit A, the stipulated interim variance conditions?
I would consult the clerk. That's typically the clerk's decision.
I have a proposal, Mr. Pearman, but
Or
Go ahead, say it.
whomever.
April 16th before so they come back before the regular variance.
All right. Any objection by the parties to that addition?
No objection.
No objection.
And secondly, the period of the variant, interim variance would be stayed as 90 days or the date of the regular variance hearing, whichever is sooner?
Correct. Correct.
And Mr. Belakapan, do you have some additional condition you want to propose?
Yeah, just I think the condition number 3, A, they're required to provide the active flare operation date and hours, but I think also the record on the keeping on the 12-month rolling period. So I think that also should be provided because that's critical. And that's a condition anyway on the permit. So
Well, any conditions that are on the permit don't need to also be reproduced here because those would still be active unless we're affirmatively providing relief from those.
yeah, but the temperature is also, the B is also on the permit. It's been included, that's all. And the flow
Okay.
rate is also.
I was
Yeah,
just,
just clarifying, you know,
Sure.
the 12-month period is something, I would like to see, you know, how they're keeping that because that's so, and that was the only, so in condition number 5, report all excess emission, including if any toxic air contaminants.
Okay.
Leave it open-ended so they can go back and determine if there's any toxic air contaminant, come back.
So item 5, you want to add after excess emissions, including any toxic contaminants?
Yeah, toxic air contaminant, if any.
And under 3A, you wanted to add then, in addition, the records of the 12-month
Rolling
log.
log, yeah.
I have no objection to those additions.
Nor does Goodrich.
All right, very good. Okay. Ms. Bogohan, go ahead, if you're ready to make a motion.
I
You
can
can
make,
deliberate after a second.
yeah, I'll make the motion quick. So in the matter of Goodrich company, corporation, sorry, case number 6253-1, I move that we grant interim variance commencing today and continuing for 90 days or until a notice hearing for regular variances held, which is currently scheduled for 4/30 to 2024, whichever comes first. From the rule 203B, the permit condition specifically number 3. And for the equipment, which is the flare, which is identified as G, yes, right in front of me, G30825, for the equipment located at 11120 South Norwalk Boulevard in Santa Fe Springs, California 90670. And the condition will be as listed in Exhibit A with the modification I proposed to condition number 3 and condition number 5. And the excess emission currently at about 0.4 pounds a day of NOx, but to be determined if there's any excess from the toxic air contaminant. And with that, I conclude my motion.
Second.
All right. Any deliberation on that?
Yeah, I wanted to add because of when I was looking at this petition, I was concerned why, it's a very strict requirement of 13 hours. It explains why they changed it from 252 based on the test, and there were benzene emissions and the control efficiency for the flare. It's not as efficient if it's going to the boiler, So the normal route is for the process gas to go to the scrubber and then to the boiler, and it's probably more efficient than if it's routed. But flare is needed as a backup. If the boiler or something is not operating properly, then it has, but it's probably not as efficient. So that's why they want to limit the operation of the flare as much as possible. It's probably the risk assessment also looked at the fact there's a school nearby, as Ms. Perez said, there's a school, don't know exactly what the distance is. So hopefully in the next regular hearing, we may get more information on the health risk assessment that was conducted, what type of emissions, besides benzene there are, if any, and whether I know they're proposing to modify their permit and maybe, it depends on what type of health risk assessment. If they did a tier 2, which is just a lookup table, or whether they're going to more detailed health risk assessment, which may give them more hours. I think that information will be helpful during to deliberate when we finally give them a longer, because of the 12-month rolling period. The variance for regular variance, if we grant them, will extend until January of next year. So I think we need to have a little bit more information if we're going to grant it for such a period of time. Right now, we're only giving for 90 days. So I think we have sufficient information to grant that without public notice, basically. So that's all I wanted to add.
Mrs. Alniego, you got a point to make?
Yeah, just one real short. comment on the number 5 of the findings. During the period of variance, in fact, the petitioner will reduce excess emissions. So I'm looking at that as all the maintenance programs and alarms and things that you're doing. The reduction is going to be hopefully avoiding an emergency. And the only thing I didn't see in there, and I would like, and I think Ms. Perez mentioned to it, and Mr. Irby, I'd just like to see or have a better feeling that your inspection program and maintenance program inspecting valves would be increased or whatever to avoid that. And I'd have a comfort zone with that. Thank you.
I'll just say again that based upon the testament evidence, I feel that they've met the 6 findings in the Health and Safety Code 42352. And so I'd call the question. How do you vote, Mr. Ali?
Aye.
Dr. Abraham?
Aye.
Mr. Let me make sure I slowly. Samaniego?
Very good. Aye.
Mr. Balakrishnan?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So it's unanimous. Thank you, ladies, gentlemen, the witness. Appreciate your patience. And that matter is concluded. We'll see those parties on April 30th. We have one more issue. Dr. Abraham is leaving now. Thank you very much for your attendance. And this is an action item. The board will consider changing the start time from 9:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. only for the hearing on March 21st, 2024.
So moved.
I understand that that's the Chiquita Canyon matter. Any members of the public who wish to comment on that particular agenda item? Madam Clerk, see anyone on Zoom from the public wants to comment on that? All right.
I move the recommendation.
First, does the district have any position there? Are you aware, Ms. Reichert?
The district requested it, so.
Okay. Then great. So that's the reason for it. As you know, we set our start time back at 9:30, but they requested 9 o'clock. So one board may ask that we have a formal vote of the hearing board for that.
So
think
moved.
Mr. Ali moved. I'd second. Any discussion? All right. No discussion request. I'll call the question. Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Balakrishnan.
Aye.
Mr. Samaniego.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So it's unanimous 4-0. That hearing will be moved to 9 a.m. And that is it. No further matters. We are adjourned for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back here on April 30th for, the 21st of March. Day, we're hearing is closed. We're off the record. The matter is concluded. Thank you, sir.
Good job, Mr. Pugh.